This video is brought to you by Brilliant. Trains have a strong place in Mexican history. In the last few years, freight trains have transported thousands of migrants to the US border via the perilous route known as La Bestia, or the Beast. Before that, they symbolised industrial and economic growth, but also rebellion, from the mid-19th century to the Mexican Revolution in 1910. Now, Mexico has a brand new megatrain, designed to create a thriving economy in the country's poorer south. The colossal 1,500-kilometre-long Tren Maya project was announced by President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, commonly known as AMLO, after he was elected in 2018, and its first section finally opened on December the 15th, after 2.5 years of construction work. But can the Maya train actually get the economy of southern Mexico back on track? In this video, we'll take a look at the new mega project, its economic and environmental impacts, and whether it can solve regional inequality in Mexico. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. Let's start by taking a look at the project itself. Made up of 5 sections in the southeastern Yucatan Peninsula, the new route runs through the states of Chiapas, Tabasco, Campeche, Yucatan, and Quintana Roo, connecting a series of UNESCO World Heritage Sites, historic towns, and other Mayan ruins. The 34-stop train line includes stations at the famous ancient sites of Chichen Itza and Tulum, as well as the lesser-known destinations of Uxmal, San Francisco de Campeche, and Calakmul, Mexico's largest forest reserve. At the moment, only around 1/3 of the line is operational, but the whole track is set to be opened by February 2024. AMLO has even declared it a matter of national security, deploying armed soldiers to protect the line, which he's called the greatest construction project in the world. The train will carry 44,000 passengers a day in 2023 on the busiest part of the route, according to the Mexican government, rising to 100,000 a day by 2052. It'll also offer some pretty fancy-looking dining and sleeper carriages, which are almost certainly geared towards foreign tourists. The government promised tickets would be subsidised for locals, but they're far from cheap. You'll have to fork out 1,166 pesos, or about $68, for an economy ticket if you want to ride. AMLO's megatrain project has also gone way over budget. It's hurtled past its initial budget of $8.5 billion to as much as $28 billion, and the Mexican government has said it could take 3 or 4 years until the train begins covering its operating costs. AMLO seems to have basically forced it through before he leaves office in September 2024, rushing important legal and environmental impact assessments, and several activist groups have voiced concerns over its effect on the jungle and indigenous communities, which we'll come back to in a bit. First though, let's examine Mexico's economic situation and how the project could make the South richer. So why build a megatrain? Well, Mexico has a long history of regional inequality, with the northern and central parts of the country being far richer than the south. AMLO, like many Mexican presidents before him, made boosting the southern economy one of his key election pledges. The basic idea is that cutting passenger and freight transportation costs in the region, while supporting tourism, will kickstart economic growth across the southeast. Mexico has one of the highest levels of inequality in the OECD, and GDP per capita in the poorest regions is 16 times lower than in the richest. While Mexico is now the second richest country in Latin America after Brazil, the economic boom it's experienced over the last 30 years didn't spread evenly across its regions. Between 2005 and 2020, the northern border states saw a higher annual employment growth rate of 1.9% compared to the Mexican average of 1.4%, thanks to increased manufacturing exports and trade with the US. Similarly, in the central part of the country, the capital Mexico City, which contributes a significant proportion of GDP, has dynamic industries in banking and financial services, and also sits in the middle of a strong car manufacturing belt that stretches right across from the west to east coasts. Conversely, the southern regions have struggled economically. Chiapas, the state at the tail end of the new train route, is one of Mexico's 3 least attractive states for investment. Its residents are also the least educated in all of Mexico, with an average schooling of just over 7.5 years. An estimated 71% of people across Chiapas of neighbouring states Oaxaca and Guerrero live in poverty, compared to the national average of 44%. Many Mexicans from these southern states have flocked to Cancun and other tourist hotspots in the Yucatan Peninsula for work. And here's where AMLO's Maya train comes in. The broad idea is that it will rely on the peninsula's existing tourism industry to create a thriving network across the southeast, creating hundreds of thousands of jobs and bringing millions more tourists to lesser-known destinations. By 2030, the project could create 750,000 new jobs across 16 municipalities, with a train station, 150,000 new jobs in rural areas, and 100,000 in construction. It could add billions of dollars to the local economy and would make it far easier and quicker for locals in rural towns to commute for work. All this might sound pretty promising for Mexico's southern economy, but it's also come at a big cost to the environment. Heavy tourist footfall can damage the prehistoric heritage sites, and scientists have also raised fears that the Yucatan's 1,000-year-old natural freshwater caves, called cenotes, could be polluted by leaking fuel or even collapse under the weight of the infrastructure. By 2021, the Mexican government had been hit by 25 injunctions about deforestation, the fragmentation of ecosystems, and the forced relocation of 300 indigenous families living on the train's route. That said, the Mexican government did put the project to a national consultation way back in 2018, and the population voted overwhelmingly in favour. Some 90% of Mexicans supported the project, although less than 1% of the population was surveyed. The vote was criticised, however, for not being available to people whose native languages were not Spanish, and there was no indigenous consultation as part of the process. Finally then, can AMLO's Maya train network actually make a difference? Many Mexicans are excited about the country's perceived rail revival, as several new passenger train projects are underway. Mexico's southeast will benefit from the increased tourism, investment and employment opportunities, and creating the train should make it easier for people to travel from poorer towns in the south to tourist destinations for work. However, the train itself does seem to cater more to wealthy tourists than locals, offering lots of expensive luxuries on board. The project has also been detrimental to the natural landscape and forced out some of the indigenous communities who live along the route. That said, any major infrastructure project is going to have an environmental cost, and trains are a far greener form of passenger transport than cars or buses. Railways are also far more space efficient than highways, as they reduce the need for widening roads, and one freight train can replace some 50 truckloads of traffic. Ultimately, it's going to be at least a decade until we start to see some proper results from AMLO's pet project. But on the face of it, the Maya train has been welcomed by many in Mexico's long-neglected southern regions, and could be a strong start to reducing economic inequality. As we step into 2024, many of us are contemplating our New Year's resolutions, always looking to improve ourselves and learn more about the world around us. And while our content is always a good starting point, a lot of stuff we talk about can seem pretty complicated, especially when we dive into analytics and detailed data. But luckily there's a fun and easy way to learn more, which also doesn't cost thousands of dollars or take years and years of schooling. That's because Brilliant is the best way to learn maths, data science and computer science interactively. And the good thing is, it doesn't take long to learn either. These complex topics are broken down into small but accessible chunks, designed around your busy schedule. Even just a few minutes a day can help you with accumulating new knowledge over time in a fun and engaging way. As time goes on, you'll also get used to that empowering feeling of learning too, because Brilliant isn't just about memorization and lectures. Brilliant teaches you by doing, using active learning techniques to teach you the principles behind otherwise quite complex subjects, and ensuring you actually understand what's going on. So whether you want to brush up on your basic math skills, improve your employment prospects, or just have another New Year's resolution for 2024, you can check out everything Brilliant has to offer free for a full 30 days by going to brilliant.org/TLDR. Plus, the first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. Thanks for your support.